The heat that day in Dry Creek felt like a living thing. It clung to every coat, every hat, every patch of skin exposed to the sun. Horses stamped in the dust, and men fanned themselves with crumpled hats, waiting for the sheriff's deputy to bring out the next captive. The air reeked of sweat, whiskey, and the faint metallic tang of fear. Dust rose in clouds, sticking to boots and throats alike. In the middle of it all stood a wooden platform, creaking beneath the weight of people who had once been free. The crowd murmured, eager and restless. Elias Harper stood toward the back, away from the men shouting prices and insults. He was tall, his shoulders broad, his face tanned from years of working under the sun. A thin scar curved along his jawline, a souvenir from a knife fight long past. His gray eyes held no amusement, no excitement, just a cold focus that unsettled the men near him. Elias wasn't a man who liked crowds or auctions. He had only come because he heard one of the captives was Apache, and he wanted to see if it was true. The captives were brought forward, 2 women and a young boy. All were barefoot, their hands bound, their faces drawn from days without comfort. The first woman, older and thin, was sold quickly to a rancher who needed someone to cook. The boy went next, a wiry child who fetched a few coins from a man who needed help with livestock. Then the deputy dragged out the last woman, and the noise around the platform fell to a hush that carried weight. She stood tall, her back straight despite the ropes around her wrists. Her hair was long and black, falling past her shoulders, streaked with dust. Her eyes were dark, so dark they seemed to drink in the light. She didn't look at the crowd or flinch when the deputy shoved her forward. There was pride there, coiled like a rattlesnake. Elias knew before hearing her name that she wasn't ordinary. She carried herself like a storm waiting for lightning. The auctioneer cleared his throat, trying to sound casual. Now, this here's a fine one. Strong arms, sharp eyes, might be some use around a ranch if you can get her to listen. She's Apache, so she'll need taming. What'll it be? Who starts me off? His words earned a few chuckles. Men muttered things under their breath that made the deputies smirk. The woman's face didn't move. She just stared past them, her gaze on the distant horizon like she could see something none of them could. $1, someone called out. Another voice, rough and mocking, shouted, not worth that much. 50 cents. The crowd laughed, the sound dry and cruel. The woman's chin lifted slightly, as if to remind them she was not an object. The auctioneer sighed, pretending frustration. Come on, gentlemen, she's young, healthy, got spirit. Might fetch water, cook, clean, even break a horse if you teach her right. Anyone else? The laughter grew quieter when Elias spoke. His voice was calm, almost gentle. $2. The auctioneer's eyebrows lifted. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to silence the room. $2 for an Apache captive. Most men wouldn't spend half that. The auctioneer grinned, sensing an easy sale. $2 going once, twice, sold to the tall man with the scar. He smacked the wooden post with his hand. The deal was done. Elias walked forward as a few men muttered under their breath, curious or mocking. He didn't care. The woman watched him approach, her gaze sharp and cold as the edge of a blade. When he cut her ropes, her first act was not to rub her wrists, but to look him in the eye. Her voice came low, steady, with the weight of a threat. You'll regret it, she said. I won't obey. Elias didn't smile. He just nodded once. Good, he said. I don't need another servant. For a moment, something flickered. In her eyes, confusion, maybe curiosity, but it passed like a shadow. She didn't speak again as he handed her a canteen of water. She didn't drink. She just stared at the dusty road ahead. They left town before the sun fell. Elias rode his horse, a dark bay named Tanner, and the woman followed on foot, refusing the second horse he offered. She didn't want his charity, and she made that clear with every step. Elias didn't argue. He knew better than to try and break pride with kindness. The road to his ranch stretched long and silent, the wind whispering through sagebrush and dry rock. Every so often, he looked back to see her still walking, head high, pace steady, never stumbling. By the time they reached the small valley where Elias lived, dusk had turned the sky to fire. His ranch wasn't much. One cabin, a small corral, a half-dry creek that trickled through the edge of the property. He dismounted, leading Tanner toward the trough. The woman stopped near the fence, her eyes scanning everything, the tools, the shack, the empty horizon beyond. It was as if she was memorizing every escape route. Elias filled a tin cup from the bucket and held it out. "Water," he said. "You've come far." She didn't take it. "I drink when I want," she said, her voice sharp but low. He shrugged and set the cup on a barrel. "Suit yourself." He walked toward the cabin, pushing the door open. "You can stay inside if you want. Floor's clean. Better than the dirt." She didn't move. "I sleep outside," she replied. Elias turned back once. "Then you sleep with the coyotes. They come close when the moon's out." She didn't answer. He let the door swing shut behind him, the soft creak echoing in the quiet. That night, when he looked through the small window, he saw her sitting by the porch steps, legs folded, staring into the dark. She hadn't moved since sunset. At dawn, the sky was streaked with orange and gold. Elias stepped outside with a tin of coffee, the scent mixing with the crisp morning air. The woman was still there, awake, her eyes half closed but alert. "You don't sleep much," he said. She didn't respond. "What's your name?" he asked. Silence stretched between them. Finally, she spoke. "Nita." The word was soft, almost reluctant, but it carried weight. Elias nodded. "Nita," he repeated, "means something." She looked at him then, her gaze steady. "It means the wind that remembers." Elias didn't press further. He respected silence. He lived in it. Days passed, and Nita kept to herself. She helped with small tasks without being asked, feeding the horse, fetching water from the creek, but she never spoke more than a few words. At night, she sat by the fire outside while Elias read from an old Bible or mended tack. She never joined him inside, and he never forced her. Something unspoken existed between them, not trust, but a fragile balance born of necessity. One afternoon, while Elias worked in the corral, he noticed Nita watching the horizon again. Her eyes followed a hawk gliding above the hills. He said quietly, "Thinking about leaving?" She didn't look at him. "You bought me," she said. "But you can't keep me." He leaned against the fence. "I didn't buy you to keep you. I just didn't want them to." That made her turn to him, her eyes narrowing. "Why?" she asked. Elias hesitated, then said, "Because they would have broken you. And I've seen enough broken things." For the first time, her expression softened, just slightly, a flicker of something that looked like understanding. But it vanished quickly. "You think I'm safe here?" she asked. "If soldiers come." Elias looked out across the plain. "Safe's a word that doesn't mean much out here," he said. "But I'll do what I can." She watched him for a long time before nodding once. That night, she slept inside the cabin for the first time, curled up by the wall near the door, as if ready to run at the first sound. The next morning brought visitors. 2 men rode up the trail, both in dust-covered uniforms. Elias saw them coming before they reached the gate. "Army scouts," he muttered. Nita froze, her hands gripping the wooden table. Elias motioned for her to stay still. The men dismounted, one of them tipping his hat. "Mornin', Harper. Heard you picked up one of the Apache women from Dry Creek. We're rounding the rest up. Command wants them accounted for." Elias's jaw tightened. "She ain't here," he said. "Must have run off after I paid for her." The soldiers exchanged glances. "You sure? Folks said she followed you out of town." Elias shrugged. "Then folks talk too much. Check the place if you don't believe me." The taller scout squinted toward the cabin, suspicious. Elias didn't move an inch. His hand rested casually on the handle of his revolver. The silence hung like a wire about to snap. Finally, the scout spit into the dust. "Ain't worth the trouble," he muttered. "She'll die out there anyway." They mounted their horses and rode off, leaving a trail of dust behind. When they were gone, Nita stepped out from behind the small storage shed, her breathing unsteady. "You lied," she said softly. "I do that sometimes," Elias replied. "Usually when someone needs it." Her eyes met his, and for a long moment neither spoke. The desert wind stirred between them, carrying the scent of dry sage. It wasn't gratitude that passed across her face, but something deeper, quieter, like the first crack in a wall that had stood too long. That evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, Nita walked to the edge of the creek. She knelt, cupping water in her hands, watching it slip through her fingers. Elias sat on the porch, whittling a piece of wood into the shape of a horse. "You could still leave," he said after a while. "You know that." She didn't look at him. And go where? He shrugged. Wherever the wind that remembers goes. She smiled then, faint and fleeting. The wind remembers everything, she said. Even what it can't forgive. For days after that, the rhythm between them shifted. She began speaking more, asking questions about his work, his horses, his scars. He learned that her father had been a leader before the soldiers came, that she had watched her people scattered, her mother taken, her brother shot in the back while running. She told it not with tears, but with the calm certainty of someone who had already lost too much to grieve. Elias listened in silence. There was nothing he could say that would matter. One night, thunder rolled in the distance, the first storm in months. The air grew thick and electric. Nita stood outside, arms outstretched as the first drops fell. Rain mingled with the dust on her skin, streaking down her face like silver. Elias watched from the porch, his heart heavy with something he couldn't name. Freedom looked like that, he thought, untamed, fierce, and fleeting. When she turned and met his gaze, he saw the wild in her eyes and knew that no man, no law, no auction could ever own her. He had paid $2 that day, but what he gained was something beyond price, a mirror that forced him to see the truth of himself. She was not his captive. He was hers, bound by respect, by guilt, by something close to reverence. And though neither said it aloud, both knew their story was only beginning. 3 days passed. The wind had changed, carrying with it the smell of rain and vengeance. Eli helped his mother mend what little was left of their fence, though every sound beyond the hills made her flinch. The sky had turned gray, the kind of gray that made the world feel smaller, as if the heavens themselves were waiting for something terrible to begin. The boy hadn't seen the cowboy since that morning, but his words still echoed in his mind. Men like Briggs always come back. At dusk, the rumble of hooves shattered the silence. Mary's hands froze mid-air. Eli turned toward the horizon and saw them, 5 riders kicking up a storm of dust, moving fast. At the front was Briggs, his hat stitched clumsily from where the bullet had torn it. His grin was gone, replaced by something colder. "Stay inside," Mary whispered, pushing Eli toward the door. But before they could bar it shut, the riders surrounded the house, their shadows long and mean in the fading light. Briggs dismounted first, spurs jingling as he stepped forward. "Evenin', Miss Carver," he called, his voice dripping with false charm. "You been doin' all right without us?" Mary stood in the doorway, pale but unbroken. "You've done enough," she said. Briggs laughed. "Oh, I ain't even started." He motioned to his men. "Search the place. Burn it if you have to." They moved fast, one smashing a lantern against the wall, another overturning the barrels near the porch. Flames caught on the dry wood, crawling up the sides of the old house like hungry snakes. Eli cried out, trying to help his mother beat the fire back, but Briggs caught him by the collar. "Where's your hero now, boy?" he sneered. "That fancy gunman ain't comin' back for you." He shoved Eli to the ground, drawing his revolver. Mary stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Leave him be." Briggs aimed at her instead, his eyes full of spite. "Should have sold the land when I offered." His finger began to tighten on the trigger, and then a voice cut through the smoke. "You talk too damn much, Briggs." The sound came from the ridge beyond the barn. A figure sat on horseback, outlined against the rising moon. The cowboy, Silas Reed. He rode down slow, steady, like judgment itself. The wind whipped his coat around his legs, the firelight glinting off the metal of his revolver. The gang turned, half blinded by the blaze, unsure whether to shoot or run. Briggs's lip curled. "You again." Silas dismounted without answering, walking straight into the glow of the fire. His eyes never left Briggs. "Told you the desert keeps its memory." Briggs barked a laugh, though his hand trembled slightly. "You think you can take all of us?" Silas's voice was calm. "Don't need to take all of you. Just the one who started it." The air cracked with tension. No one breathed. A single drop of sweat slid down Briggs's temple. Then, in a blur faster than thought, the world exploded in gunfire. The flash from Silas's pistol lit the smoke like lightning. 2 of Briggs's men fell before they even drew. The others scattered, firing wildly into the night, their shots lost in the roar of the burning house. Eli clung to his mother as chaos ripped through the yard. The boy's ears rang with the sound of bullets and fire. When the smoke cleared, Briggs was the last one standing, blood on his arm, hatred in his eyes. "You should have stayed gone," he snarled, raising his gun. But Silas was already moving. He kicked the burning doorframe, sending a cloud of sparks between them, and in that heartbeat of blindness, his shot found its mark. Briggs staggered backward, eyes wide with disbelief. He looked down at the dark bloom spreading across his chest and sank to his knees. The silence afterward was deafening. The only sound left was the crackle of dying fire. Silas walked up slowly, his gun still smoking. He looked down at Briggs, who was gasping for air, his arrogance gone. "I told you," Silas said quietly. "The desert remembers." Briggs tried to speak, but no words came. His head tilted back, and he was gone. Silas holstered his revolver, turning toward Mary and Eli. The fire had nearly devoured the house, the roof sagging inward. Without a word, he grabbed the nearest bucket, dousing the flames until only embers remained. When it was over, the night seemed to breathe again. Mary sank to the ground, exhaustion breaking through her strength. Eli ran to Silas, his small hands clutching at the man's coat. "You came back," the boy whispered. The cowboy knelt beside him, his face unreadable in the moonlight. "Told you I would." Mary looked up, her voice shaking. "Why? You don't owe us a thing." Silas paused for a long moment before answering. "Maybe not, but every man's gotta decide what kind of ghost he wants to be remembered by." His gaze drifted to the horizon, where dawn was beginning to touch the desert edge. The fire was out, but their home was half gone, a blackened skeleton against the pale sky. Silas reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small pouch. He tossed it to Eli. It landed with a dull jingle, silver coins, more than the boy had ever seen. "Start again," the cowboy said simply. "Your father built this place once. You can too." Mary's eyes filled with tears. "What about you?" Silas placed his hat back on his head. "Me, I got further roads to ride. Trouble don't stop by itself." He turned toward his horse, the dawn painting his shadow long across the ground. Eli ran after him. "Will we see you again?" The cowboy smiled faintly, just enough to show he'd heard. "If the wind's right." Then he swung into the saddle and rode off toward the rising sun. The desert swallowed him whole, leaving only dust and silence in his wake. Mary wrapped her arms around her son, watching until he disappeared beyond the ridge. The boy whispered softly, "He saved us, Mama." She nodded, her voice barely a breath. "No, Eli, he saved what was left of good men." And as the first light of morning broke across the land, the legend of Silas Reed was born.